electromagnetic pulse. Think of it as a tsunami wave composed solely of energy. The first studies of these massive pulses of energy were carried out by scientists who were researching the effects of atomic bomb blasts. The familiar flash of light of an A-bomb is only part of the massive energy being released. There are also radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, and gamma rays being emitted. And the force of these waves racing through the atmosphere can be as destructive as a bomb. In July 1962, a 1.44 megaton nuclear bomb detonated 250 miles above the Pacific Ocean, called the Starfish Prime Test, caught even scientists by surprise, as the electromagnetic pulse it generated was much larger than calculated. It was felt in Hawaii, more than 800 miles away from the detonation point, knocking out about 300 streetlights and setting off burglar alarms. It's the energy used in a common kitchen appliance that makes it possible to pop popcorn or reheat leftovers in just a matter of moments. Microwaves. In the future, it will not be impossible for microwaves to be used in handheld weapons and even bombs, and their effects could be even more devastating than lasers. A handheld microwave weapon could roast a person from the inside. A microwave superbomb could cause a technological holocaust, shutting down every vehicle, radio, television, and computer, plunging an entire country into chaos. Dr. Ron Gilgenbach is director of the Plasma Pulse Power and Microwave Lab at the University of Michigan. He has been working with microwaves for more than 30 years.
We're in the Plasma Pulse Power and Microwave Lab at the University of Michigan. In this lab, we perform research on relativistic magnetrons that generate high-power microwave radiation. High-power microwaves are used for cooking food, of course, in your oven magnetron. These microwaves can interfere with the communications in your home. They can also interfere with military equipment. So there's a lot of interest in making very high-power microwave sources like this relativistic magnetron, which is equivalent to 500,000 of your microwave ovens.
That's enough power to short-circuit the computers that control every facet of modern warfare, from radar communications to missile launches, paralyzing an entire military operation. This is part of the reason you're asked to turn off your cell phone on flights. There's a risk that these frequencies released by your phone could possibly interfere with airplane controls. A blast of microwaves will trigger a shock wave of electrical pulses that race through the air, generating a power surge that knocks out circuits.
This is very important to the Air Force Office of Scientific Research and other Department of Defense agencies, because if you could disrupt the electronics in your enemy's weaponry, then you could save our soldiers.
Now imagine the damage that could result from a microwave blast 1,000 times more powerful being detonated over the U.S. In a flash, every piece of electronics in the country would shut down. It would be like taking the country and transporting it back in time to the 1800s. The results would be devastating. As our electronics become more sophisticated, they also become more vulnerable to just this type of attack. And the military is developing a weapon that can do it. It's called an electromagnetic bomb, or E-bomb.
A kind of weapon that is in development that would be devastating in ways that we're not accustomed to seeing is one based around the idea of an electromagnetic pulse. This could be, for example, some sort of bomb that was set off in the atmosphere over a city, and it would generate a very powerful EMF pulse that would cover the city and short out every piece of electrical equipment there. Radios, computers, cars, everything inside range would be shorted out and destroyed.
Which might show up on the battlefield within the next 20 years.
There's a lot of interest in the DoD these days. They are tremendously interested in seeing one of these devices be packaged in a mobile platform, whether it could be a cruise missile or some other platform, and this device can then go flying around and could affect the electronics of your enemy, but without any collateral damage.
Technically, that kind of EMF bomb is one that's non-lethal. After all, it's not directly killing anybody. But of course, there would be a lot of fatalities that would result if that happened inside any kind of settled area. People who were in cars would lose control over their cars. Not to mention the anarchy that would suddenly break out.
Like lasers and death rays, an E-bomb can strike with deadly accuracy.
The thing about this kind of EMF weapon is that it scales very, very easily. Yes, you could use something that would be like a bomb and set it off over a city in order to try to take out an entire city, but you could do much smaller sorts of devices that would have a much more limited range. So you could take out a particular neighborhood. You could set off something like this down in Wall Street in the interest of trying to knock out the stock exchanges.
We're learning more about what may have caused a mystery illness that struck American diplomats and CIA agents. Here's Andrea Mitchell.
Mark Polymeropoulos spent decades in the CIA chasing terrorists across the Middle East. But one night in a Moscow hotel in 2017 changed everything.
I couldn't stand up. I was falling over in my room. I thought I was going to vomit. I was incredibly nauseous. I had this incredible ringing in my ears. After a career really doing some crazy things in my life, this was the most terrifying moment of my life.
After a year-long investigation, the National Academies of Sciences concluded the most likely explanation: directed pulsed microwave energy.
Pulsed directed microwave radiation can be focused on a particular space or physical environment at the level of several yards or dozens of yards.
So one person could be in bed and have it targeting that person and not someone right next door.
Correct.
Russia has a long history of working on these weapons, but denies involvement. The State Department says the investigation is ongoing, and each possible cause remains speculative. Not to Mark Polymeropoulos. And why would the Russians want to target you?
I was in charge, or one of several officers in charge of overseeing our efforts against them.
The crippling migraines forced him to retire last year at age 50.
Live blood analysis and electrosmog. We can learn much by looking at our blood under a microscope. This short video shows a macrophage, which is like a vacuum cleaner, engulfing bacteria among red blood cells. I decided to find out what my blood looked like. I pricked my finger, placed a drop of blood on a slide, and looked at it under the microscope. This is what I saw. The cells are round, some are separate, and a few are sticking together. Overall, fairly healthy looking blood. This testing was done in a clean electromagnetic environment, and I did not eat or drink before or during testing. I then worked on a computer for 70 minutes and looked at my blood again. This time, the cells are sticking together like stacked coins. This is called rouleau formation. Later that day, I used a cordless phone for 10 minutes and looked at my blood again. And this is what I saw. Very unhealthy looking blood. There are virtually no single cells. Most of the cells are now in rouleau formation. A doctor told me this is what she sees with cancer patients.
Joined the Royal Navy in 1960, and I specialised in microwave warfare. Radar, obviously, which uses microwave, but they don't just teach you radar, they teach you all about microwaves and other uses. A small part of my job was to question captured agents, spies, terrorists, because microwaves then were used as weapons, as they are today. It is a perfect stealth weapon, and when governments don't like a group of people, for instance, the ladies who protest at Greenham Common in England about the American missile base they camped, they were microwaved. We microwaved Catholics in Northern Ireland to make them sick. It goes on all over the world, and it's a weapon that you don't know you're being targeted because the dose is very, very low, which is actually more dangerous than a high dose. It's very, very low, and it may take a year or two, but you can cause neurological damage and cancers with low-level microwaves, and you can make all your opponents sick. It's a perfect weapon for a government. We have a natural protection against microwaves. It was developed since the Stone Age against thunderstorms and massive amounts of radiation coming into our body. And what you're risking by putting Wi-Fi into schools is the future generations of all of these girls. But it gets worse, because this particular DNA, the mitochondrial DNA inside you, and the DNA inside you, the mitochondrial DNA, you can trace unchanged to your mother, her mother, her mother, right the way back to the beginning of the human race in Africa, the Stone Age. You can trace your ancestors, if you could, right back to the very first lady. It is unchanged, the mitochondria. And that is being unchanged in your children, which means if you damage it, your child could be genetically damaged, then her child, and her child, and her child, forever. You are condemning the future generations of every single child until there are no more lines left in the female in your family. You must stop. A female must stop producing children for this to stop.
We knew as early as 73, the World Health Organization knew as early as 73, that microwave radiation had biological effects and was a health hazard. All right. So 5G is that. We've still got it rolling out. This is, look, some of the science. They all knew about it. Nobody's mentioned the mainstream. So we have to get this shared, because people just don't know the dangers that are being posed to them. Your Alexa will kill you. Your Wi-Fi is going to kill you in the home. It's an immune system suppressor. If they use a biological weapon, long-term exposure to microwave radiation provokes cancer growth. Microwaves to confine acoustic vibrations in viruses. Yes, they activate viruses, all right? They can activate viruses, but this is even more interesting. Your local doctors, your GP, should know about this, because this was in the Lancet, and that shows the microwave radiation increases and how this causes, look, chronic exposure being associated with increased in oxidative stress and DNA damage and cancer risk. Not only that, anxiety, depression, suicide, all linked to this. All right. This is an industry document which states quite clearly electromagnetic radiation emitted out of wireless communication modules in various electronic devices have been identified by researchers biologically hazardous to humans as well as other living beings. It is an immune system suppressor. So if the virus is real, you'd think your government would want to be talking about the real risk to you, which is exposures to this type of radiation. Surely, you would think that, wouldn't you? And they're not mentioning it. The mainstream media aren't mentioned. In fact, nobody's mentioning 5G. Bizarre. Oh, the military. Well, the military know about microwave radiation weaponry, believers. In fact, if you want to... Bioeffects of selected non-lethal weapons. They were talking about microwave radiation weapons, by the way, and they are lethal. The non-lethal bits, bit of interest in radio frequency, direct energy weapons. That's 5G, by the way, because it's a collimated, coherent light radiation signal. All right. Oh, let's have a look at this one. So EPA, the EPA knew about the biological effects, right? This is really early on. This was a 1984 report. You're still doing anything about it, do you? Being kept from you by the mainstream media. The largest 5G, the largest unethical medical experiment in human history, an illegal, in breach of the Nuremberg Code crime, human rights crime. That's just a matter of fact. So any of the criminals who are involved with it, I'm going to tell you, justice is coming.
It's time to remove your footprint. Agenda 21 is coming soon.